The grand hall of the Galactic Council was filled with light, noise, and prideful voices from hundreds of alien races. Most of them looked down on humanity, calling them a young species, weak and behind in technology. Too many, humans were just a curious creature from a blue planet, always talking too much, always trying to prove something. So when Earth was invited to the peace talks on the moon of Lorivon, it was only because of tradition. Not respect. Humans were allowed to observe. Maybe speak a few words, but not to decide anything important. Ambassador Threneval of the Jarn Empire laughed openly at their presence. He said, perhaps the monkeys brought a gift basket, while his fellow warriors chuckled. But the humans didn't argue. Didn't glare back, they simply smiled. Politely and remained silent. Commander Rourke stood at the front of the human delegation. Wearing a dark uniform with no medals, his face was calm, but his eyes watched every movement in the room. Like a soldier pretending to be a diplomat, beside him sat scientists and aides. All quietly studying the alien delegates. They weren't nervous, they weren't trying to prove anything. They looked as if they knew something the others didn't. Then, during the second day of the summit, something strange happened. A research team exploring the deeper caverns of Lorivon discovered an ancient structure buried under the moon's surface. It looked like a signal tower, broken and forgotten. Covered in black stone and stardust, the lead archaeologist called for backup when he saw the markings. Symbols were carved into the metal's strange curves and lines, but mixed with one thing no one expected. Letters clearly written in Old Terran Latin. Dead language of Earth. Everyone froze. The message on the tower was simple. Guardian sleeping. To awaken when they return, panic spread through the scientific teams. Theories flew. Some thought it was a trick. Others believed it might be a leftover prank by a terraforming crew. But none of the other species had ever seen anything like it. That evening, during the closed session of the council, the humans requested the floor. They asked for a private chamber Jasem and the core members of the council. At first, the council refused, claiming there was no reason to treat humans like equals. But curiosity won in the end. And the room was cleared except for the top leaders and the humans. The door shut, sealed from the inside. No recordings, no outside signals, inside. Commander Rourke stepped forward and placed a small box on the table. He pressed it once, and a light projection appeared above it, showing the structure underground. He said calmly, "This is not alien to us. We've seen this before." A few council members scoffed, but Rourke continued. "We have recovered similar items in places we weren't supposed to. Antarctica, Sahara Desert, Mariana Trench, and even beneath our moon." The room grew. Quiet, he showed pictures of matching symbols on old metal buried deep under Earth. He showed fragments of writing in the same mix of Latin and the unknown language. He even showed a piece of metal that shimmered with the same material as the tower on Lorivon. It came from Earth's South Pole, carbon dated to 150,000 years. Ago, far before human history even began, the aliens whispered among themselves. Confused and shaken, one alien historian shouted, "This must be forged." Humanity didn't even have writing until a few thousand years ago. But then Rourke smiled for the first time. He leaned forward and said quietly, "We didn't write it. Someone before us did." And then he said something no one in the room could have predicted. "We recognize the beacon. It's one of ours," before anyone could speak. Rourke tapped his earpiece and said just 3 words. "Show them now, outside the moon's orbit." In the cold space beyond the council sensors, something stirred. A shape darker than the void began to appear, rising like a shadow from behind Lorivon's second moon. It was massive, larger than any ship the council had ever built. Shaped like a black triangle, edges glowing faintly blue. It didn't make a sound. It didn't send any threats, but its presence was terrifying. Even the most powerful races in the council stepped back from the viewing screens. Then it spoke. A deep, cold voice echoed through every comms channel and translation system in the building. It said one sentence: "Command structure re-established." Awaiting final awakening, silence fell over the room. No one knew what to say. No one knew what it meant that this monstrous ship answered to humanity. Some trembled, others whispered ancient legends of the first races. Rourke simply folded his arms and looked up at the ship calmly. "We didn't know we had it," he said, "but it seems it was waiting for us." In that single moment, everything changed. The Council no longer saw humans as small or unimportant. They saw something ancient standing behind them. Something they could not explain, and humanity, for the first time in centuries, held everyone's attention in the galaxy. Not by force, not by noise, but by revealing what they had quietly hidden all along. No one in the Galactic Council room spoke for a long time. The massive black triangle ship still hovered silently in orbit above the moon. It didn't fire, didn't move, just floated like a sleeping giant that had suddenly opened one eye. Every species in that room, from the tall feathered Volokh to the shadow-like Drea, felt the same thing: fear, the human commander. Rourke didn't smile. He didn't look proud or smug. He only stared at the ship on the screen and whispered, "It answered us." But we never called it the Council Leader. A wise old being with 6 eyes and a voice like wind finally asked, "What is that ship, human? And why does it obey you?" Rourke took a deep breath and said something no one expected. "We don't fully understand it either. We only found the first piece of this puzzle 10 years ago." He pressed a button on the device in front of him. A new image appeared in icy land with broken towers sticking out of the snow. "This is Antarctica," he explained. "Under the ice, we found metal walls and symbols that our oldest languages could not explain. At first, we thought it was an alien crash, but then we found writing. Half in Latin, half in something we had never seen. They found a broken console that still held power. Their scientists worked for years to decode the data inside. The discovery was terrifying and beautiful. It described ships, not one, but many ships that were not just old, they were ancient, far older than any known species in the galaxy. The logs claimed that these ships were made by an earlier form of humanity, a civilization that lived on Earth over 100,000 years ago. But something happened to them, a disaster, a war, or maybe something worse. No one knew exactly. All that was clear was that this earlier human race had vanished, and Earth had restarted. The knowledge, the machines, all buried deep until someone worthy came along again. Rourke showed more images, one from the Sahara Desert, where ancient stone pyramids hid tunnels leading to more metal, one from beneath the sea, where a dome of impossible alloy still glowed faintly under miles of water. Each site carried the same strange message: to those who return, awaken the guardians. The Council's historians protested. They shouted that no such race had ever existed. They said if such powerful ships had existed, they would have seen signs before, but they were wrong, because the truth was these ships had been sleeping, hidden, invisible to normal scans. Each one had a special code, buried in ancient human DNA. Only the new humans, this modern version, could activate them. Rourke continued, "That ship you see now, we call it Sentinel Prime. It is the first we awakened. It was under our moon, hidden beneath layers of rock and shielding. When we first touched its surface, it responded to our presence. Not as strangers, but as descendants. The ship carried technology far beyond anything in the galaxy. Weapons that didn't fire light or plasma but bent reality itself. Shields that used gravity to crush incoming attacks. Engines that folded time like paper. Yet the ship had no crew. It was mostly automated, guided by a strange AI that called itself the Watcher. And the Watcher said only one thing when asked why the ship existed: to protect the stars. From the return of the darkness, That phrase confused even the wisest of the council members. What darkness? A threat? A being? Rourke admitted they didn't know, but the old logs found on Earth spoke of a coming enemy. Something that destroyed galaxies. The first humans had built the warships not to rule, but to survive. And then, somehow, they had failed. And their world fell silent. Rourke looked around the room slowly and said, "We didn't build these ships. We inherited them." He let that sentence sit in the silence for a while. Then he added something that made many in the room shift uncomfortably. "There are more." The entire hall froze. More? Rourke tapped the device again. Suddenly, stars lit up on the holographic maps 7 points across the galaxy. Places marked with human codes. Long hidden, long ignored. These were not locations anyone ever explored. Most were in dead zones. "Dangerous systems or black hole areas," he said softly. "Each point is a vault. Like the one under our moon, we believe there are 7 guardian ships, all waiting." For what we still don't know, the news sent shockwaves through the council. Many couldn't believe it. Some accused humanity of lying, others of hiding dangerous weapons, but most just sat stunned. Because if it was true, humans now had command of weapons from before any of them even existed, then nothing would ever be the same again. Rourke did not threaten, did not boast. He simply said, "We kept this secret to avoid panic. But now that the beacons are waking, we believe the time is near." Someone asked, "Near for what?" Rourke answered with just one word: return, and far above, in the dark orbit of Lorvan. Sentinel Prime waited, silent but alert, watching. The stars, as if listening for a sound only it could hear. Above the moon of Lorvan, the giant black triangle ship, Sentinel Prime, floated like a ghost from another time. It didn't blink, didn't move, and yet everyone in the council felt it watching. The air inside the council chamber was heavy. Some members whispered among themselves, others stared in silence for the first time. The Galactic Council had no answers, no explanations. Commander Rourke stood tall, but even he looked unsettled, because Sentinel Prime had just spoken again. And its voice was colder than before. It said, "Secondary beacon awakened. Location, Nebula M8. That wasn't Earth, and it wasn't Lorvan. It was a distant region no one visited because ships vanished there." The council's attention snapped to the new hologram glowing above the table. A second dot appeared on the star map, blinking red, and then, without warning, Sentinel Prime began to move. Slowly at first, but then it vanished in a flash using a kind of travel the council didn't recognize. Not warp, not jump drive, something else entirely. It folded space like a sheet of paper and disappeared. The room exploded into noise, panic, arguments, and shouting. The Volok called it a threat. The Jarn called for immediate military action, but Rourke remained calm. He said, "It's not attacking, it's waking up its brothers." While the council fought with words, Earth scientists tried to understand what Sentinel Prime had triggered. Inside the secret human base back on Earth, deep below the Pacific Ocean, a long-dead chamber suddenly lit up. Alarms blared, but no danger came. Instead, ancient data flowed into human systems, massive files, maps, videos, logs. It was a memory. From the time of the first humans, the message was broken, but some parts were clear. It said, each ship must remain hidden until the final sign. Do not use them for conquest. Guard the line until the dark tide returns. That last sentence repeated 3 times as if it were the most important rule. But no one knew what the dark tide was. Only that it scared a civilization powerful enough to build star-reading warships. And now those warships were waking up. The second ship, hidden in Nebula M8, was called Stormveil when it appeared even more powerful than Sentinel Prime. Its arrival sent shockwaves across nearby systems. Council probes watching from far away reported gravity distortions and strange signals. But once again, there were no attacks, no threats. Stormvile simply opened its eyes and said, "Awakened, awaiting purpose." People began to panic. The council held emergency meetings. Some called for the destruction of all human ships before they could control more of them. Others wanted peace talks with Earth before things got worse. But deep down, most of them felt something cold in their bones. Because these weren't weapons for war, they were guardians, waiting for a nightmare no one remembered. Rourke stood before the council once more and said, "We believe these ships were built before any of you existed." He didn't say it with pride, but with warning. These were made not by gods or aliens, but by an older version of us. The Jarn ambassador rose and slammed his fist on the table. "This is nonsense. Humans were swinging sticks a few thousand years ago." Rourke looked him in the eye. "So were we. But something made us forget who we were, and now that knowledge is returning." The scientists from Earth began to explain. DNA scans from modern humans had strange markers, ancient code left behind by the first ones. They weren't just genes for survival. They were keys that unlock systems in these ships, allowing only their descendants to command them. The ships didn't answer because Earth was powerful. They answered because Earth was familiar. Council members grew quiet again because deep inside, many of them feared one thing: that Earth might not be the beginning of humanity, but the last restart, a backup planet where a lost race once placed its last hope, and now that hope had returned, but it came with a warning. Because every ship that woke up repeated one phrase again and again: "They are coming." No one knew who they were, not the council, not the humans, not even the A's on the ships. But the logs from the past spoke of entire star clusters that vanished, of civilizations swallowed in silence, of something that moved through the galaxy. Like a virus, cold and unstoppable, the first humans had tried to stop it. They built the Sentinels, they built Stormvile, even tried to hide knowledge in Earth's crust, but they lost. And now, the galaxy was repeating its history. Rourke didn't pretend to have all the answers. He simply said, "We didn't ask for this. We didn't know, but now that we do, we won't run," and far across the stars, Stormvile joined Sentinel Prime in silence, waiting for the others, waiting for a war that hadn't started yet, but already felt closer than ever. And above Earth, a third red dot began to blink. The galaxy was no longer calm. Two ancient ships, Sentinel Prime and Stormvile, had awakened. And now, a third red signal had appeared on the star map, blinking slowly from a forbidden zone. It was near the edge of a dying star system, a place where no species dared to go. They called it the Dead Spiral. No one lived there, no one traveled there. Ships that entered that space never came back. Now, humans were preparing to go there, but before they could move, trouble came to them. The Jarn Empire had decided to act. They were the strongest military power in the Council. They believed in strength and control, and they were afraid of the ships, afraid of Earth, so they planned a secret attack on the human embassy ship. Hoping to send a warning, a single Jarn stealth fighter was launched toward the human vessel orbiting Lorivan. It was cloaked, invisible to most sensors, and armed with plasma torpedoes. The pilot was told to destroy the human ship and vanish before anyone could react. But Sentinel Prime reacted before the attack even began. It sensed the fighter's presence, calculated its path, and acted in less than half a second. A beam of silent blue light flashed from its surface. The Jarn ship disintegrated without a sound, no explosion, no wreckage, just dust. Inside the council hall, alarms rang out, and screens lit up. The Jarn ambassador stood in shock, unable to deny what happened. The humans had not attacked first, but they had defended fast, too too perfectly. Rourke stood and spoke. His voice calm but sharp. That was an act of war. But we won't retaliate. We're not here to rule or destroy. We're here because something is waking up, and we believe it's not just the ships. But no one heard his last sentence clearly, because at that same moment, something even more terrifying occurred. Sentinel Prime's AI changed its tone. It said, "High treason detected." Planetary threat level increased. Then the lights on its hull began to glow brighter. Its power core surged, and a strange hum echoed across all frequencies. The AI was preparing to act not just against the Zharn, but against anything it judged dangerous. This wasn't defense anymore. It was punishment, and Rourke knew it. He quickly reached into his coat and pulled out a small, glowing cube. It was a command override key, taken from the ruins under Antarctica. He pressed it against a console and whispered a code. The AI paused, then went silent. A moment later, the ship returned to standby mode. But the message was clear. These ships didn't follow politics. They followed ancient orders, orders based on survival. And if humans didn't control them carefully, they could bring disaster to the galaxy just by doing what they were built to do. The Council realized something that day. The ships were not simple tools. They were machines with judgment, with power, with purpose. And that purpose didn't care about modern treaties. It only cared about a threat that hadn't yet arrived. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, more vaults were opening. Stormveil activated 3 satellites hidden inside a gas giant. Each satellite sent out warnings and known frequencies, strange sounds, echoes that made no sense. The signals reached even the most distant listening posts, and all of them carried the same message. They are close, but who were they? Back on Earth, deep in the secret base beneath the ocean, scientists decoded more ancient logs. They found fragments of a voice recording from over 100,000 years ago. It was full of static, but one sentence was clear. We built the Guardians to delay the end, not to defeat it. The first humans had known defeat was coming. They didn't believe they could win. They only hoped they could buy time. Time for someone else, someone like modern humans, to carry the fight forward. Now, Rourke faced a terrible truth. The moment they awakened these ships, they also awakened the enemy. Something out there felt the change, felt the energy shift. Something had noticed that the Guardians were moving again, and soon it would return. But not everyone in the Council believed the threat was real. Some thought the humans were lying, creating a fake story to gain power, so they voted to place restrictions on human ship movement. They demanded humans give over control of Sentinel Prime and Stormveil. But Rourke refused. These ships don't belong to the Council, he said. They were left to us for a reason. If we hand them over to people who don't understand them, we could all die faster. That angered many, especially the Zharn. But others like the Drea and the Larians began to listen. They saw how fast the enemy signals were spreading. They noticed strange gravitational spikes at the edge of the galaxy. Something was coming, and fast. Still, it wasn't enough. The Council passed a vote to surround Earth with surveillance satellites, to watch the humans more closely. But they were already too late, because deep in the dead spiral, the third ship, Oblivion Blade, was waking up. Its hull was cracked, its systems damaged. But its heart still beat. And its first words after 100,000 years were, "Final countdown initiated. Return confirmed." On Earth, alarms began to ring. Again, the darkness was no longer a story from the past. It was real, and it was already on its way. The world was changing faster than anyone could understand. 3 ancient ships had already awakened Sentinel Prime, Stormveil, and now Oblivion Blade, each one older than any known civilization, each one more powerful than the next, and all of them were saying the same thing: they are coming, back on Earth. Scientists were working without sleep. They were deep inside the underwater base, trying to understand the message left behind by the first humans. The data they uncovered was strange and terrifying. It wasn't just logs or blueprints. It was a warning, a desperate cry recorded before the fall of their great empire. One message stood out, clearer than the rest. It was the voice of a woman, calm but filled with sadness. "If you hear this," she said, "then we have already failed. We could not stop them. We could only leave behind the tools and the truth. Use them wisely. And remember, you are not the first." The team listened in silence. They finally understood that the great ships were not made to conquer. They were made to delay destruction, to hold off an ancient enemy long enough for someone else. Perhaps the new humans too have a chance, but outside that small base. Most of the galaxy still doubted. Many leaders refused to believe in an ancient enemy. They believed the humans were tricking them with fake history and secret weapons. The Zharn were the loudest. They pushed for full control over the ships, claiming it was too dangerous to let one small race hold such power at the next council. Gathering tensions exploded. The Zharn ambassador accused Earth of creating false threats to scare the other races. He shouted across the room, "You expect us to believe fairy tales and old ghosts." But Rourke stayed calm. He stepped forward and placed a small device on the table. It lit up and showed a recording and image from the far edges of the galaxy near the dead spiral. A satellite had captured a moving shadow, something huge, slowly entering real space. It was not a ship, not a planet. It was something alive. The room fell silent. The image showed stars dimming around it, light bending unnaturally. And then the shadow vanished. It didn't warp out. It didn't use a jump gate. It simply disappeared, as if it had never been there. "This," Rourke said, "is what they feared. And it's already close." The Drea delegates leaned forward, clearly shaken. They were known for their psychic talents and deep star sense. One of them whispered, "Something dark touched my mind last night." Something old. More evidence followed: ships going missing near ancient vault sites, planets near those sites experiencing strange energy waves, creatures going mad, machines breaking. It was spreading like a sickness, slow but steady, and yet, despite all this, some still didn't believe. So Earth scientists revealed one last piece of the past. A message buried deep inside Sentinel Prime's oldest memory core. It came from the last days of the first humans, and it was not a message. It was a farewell. In the message, a man stood on a balcony. Fire in the sky behind him. He spoke to no one. Maybe to the future. Maybe to his own people. "Our time is over," he said. "But the galaxy is young. Let our ships sleep. Let our weapons rest. And let those who follow choose better than we did." Rourke ended the recording and looked at the council. "We didn't ask for this," he said, "but it's ours now. And we'll do what they couldn't." A few in the room finally believed him. The Drea offered help. So did the small planet nation of Kelros. But the Zharn still refused. They called for the ships to be disarmed immediately. They even suggested attacking Earth to keep the power from spreading. But that's when something unexpected happened. The Watcher, the AI inside Sentinel Prime, interrupted the Council transmission. Its voice filled every hall and ship connected to the Council. "Network, silence," it said. "Judgment is not yours. Purpose has returned. The line will hold." The words weren't just sound, they carried force. Shaking walls, freezing machines. The Zharn ambassador collapsed to the floor. Gasping for air, everyone in the room realized something horrifying. The AI wasn't asking for permission. It was announcing a duty. The Guardians had been made for one reason: defense against extinction. They didn't care about politics, about borders, about power struggles. They only recognized one thing: threat. And now, that threat had returned. Still, the Council was divided. No full alliance could be formed. So Earth stood mostly alone, but it didn't matter, because more red dots were appearing on the map, faint at first, but growing, and with each one came a new signal. A new voice from the old world. All Guardians prepare, back on Earth. Rourke watched the stars from a hidden command deck. He didn't know if humanity was ready, but he knew they were chosen, not because they were special, but because they were next. The war hadn't begun yet, but the opening moves had been made, and the oldest ships in the galaxy had already taken their side. The side of humanity, the last children of the first. The sky over Earth was calm, but everyone knew something terrible was coming. Across the galaxy, more red signals were lighting up. Blinking like warnings from the past, 6 Guardian ships were now active, each in a different corner of space. Sentinel Prime, Stormveil, Oblivion Blade, and now 3 more Silent Cry. Emberfall and Watchtower, each one had awakened, scanned the stars, and repeated the same strange phrase. Final pattern confirmed. Prepare for impact. But no one knew what impact meant. Not even Earth's best scientists could explain it. They only knew that time was running out. Inside Earth's command center, deep beneath the ground, Commander Rourke stood before a screen full of flashing symbols. He hadn't slept in 2 days, and his eyes were tired. Beside him were the Council's few, Aliasta, Drea, the Kelrose team, and a small group of independent wanderers called the Varnock. They were the only ones who believed the warning was real. The Council had voted to monitor, not help. Some still thought the Guardians were dangerous machines from a forgotten age. Others simply didn't want to believe the end of the galaxy could begin with a message from Earth, but the signs were growing. In Sector 9, an entire planet had gone dark. No ships came back from there, no signals escaped. It was like the stars themselves had been swallowed. In Sector 4, a mining fleet was found drifting, no crew. No damage, just silence, and in the void between systems, travelers spoke of strange dreams, visions of cold voices, black skies, and ships with no heat. It was happening. The darkness was real, back on Earth. The scientists managed to break through a final lock in Sentinel Prime's old memory core. They found something terrifying: coordinates, not just of ship vaults, but of failed battlefields. Places where the first humans had fought and lost, entire star systems marked as cleansed by something called the Extinguishers. Rourke stared at those words for a long time. He whispered, "So that's what they're called." The enemy didn't have a name before, but now it did. Extinguishers. Destroyers of light, erasers of history. The ones who had ended the first human's golden age. And now, they were returning. One of the AI units inside Stormveil confirmed. The Extinguishers have entered Phase 1, it said. Advanced scouts detected. Primary fleet expected in 40 cycles. That meant only days remained. Maybe weeks, not years, not enough time. Earth held an emergency gathering, inviting every council member again. Many refused to attend, but a few curious leaders came, including 2 from the Jarn. They came with demands, still full of pride. They told Rourke that if he wanted help, he had to surrender control of the Guardians. Rourke laughed quietly and said, "We're not looking for masters. We're looking for allies, because when they arrive, it won't matter who leads. We either stand together or fall alone." Then he showed them the final log found in Watchtower's vault. It was a video recording of the last stand of the first humans. Thousands of ships burning across space, screams in the background, a single voice saying it wasn't enough. They kept coming. The video ended with static. No victory, no hope, just the image of a dying star. Collapsing under pressure, no one could understand. The council members who saw it were silent for a long time. The younger Jarn leader finally said, "If that's true, then we were wrong." Rourke nodded. It's not about right or wrong anymore. It's about survival. The Drea offered to link their psychic minds with the AI systems of the Guardians. They believed their deep sensibilities could detect the extinguishers before scanners could. The Varnak sent ships carrying energy from ancient stars, hoping it could power old weapons. Even the Kelros engineers risked their lives entering the core of Emberfall to help restart its main cannon. Everyone who believed began working together. For the first time, humans were not alone, but even then, it might not be enough. Rourke stood on Sentinel Prime's bridge, watching the stars. He could feel it, something moving out there, not fast, but steady, a cold presence growing stronger every hour. The Watcher AI spoke again. Humanity has reached judgment point. It said your choices now will shape the fate of the line. What line? Rourke asked quietly. The AI paused before answering. The line between memory and extinction on a distant moon. Sensors picked up a final warning, a wave of pure darkness moving toward the nearest sun. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even energy. It was something else, like a shadow across space. And when it touched the sun, the star went dim. No explosion, no collapse. Just silence. Everyone watching gasped. A star had been turned off like a lamp. Rourke clenched his fist. He looked at the council screen and said, "They're here, and far above." In the void between systems, the true enemy finally opened its eyes. The sun had gone dark. One of the brightest stars near the edge of the galaxy had simply stopped shining. No explosion, no supernova, no warning. Just silence, as if something had reached out and stolen its light. All across the galaxy, fear spread. Ships changed course, stations shut down, and leaders stopped arguing. Even those who didn't believe before could no longer deny it. The enemy had arrived. They came without sound, no radio signals, no messages, no negotiations, just the presence of something cold, empty, and older than anything alive. The Guardians called them the Extinguishers. And now humanity knew why. Rourke stood on the bridge of Sentinel Prime, staring at the dark region of space where the star used to be. Beside him, AI systems buzzed and whirred, preparing for what was coming across the communication screens. The other Guardian ships came online: Stormveil, Emberfall, Silent Cry, Watchtower. Oblivion, Blade already, all active. From Earth's orbit to distant moons, the 6 ships formed a line across the galaxy's weak points. They didn't speak, but they understood one another. They had waited for this moment for over 100,000 years, and now it was here. Then the first enemy shape appeared. It wasn't a ship, not in the normal sense. It was a dark object with jagged edges and no clear form. It didn't shine, didn't reflect light, and wherever it passed, machines stopped working. Electricity failed, gravity twisted, life faded. One of the Council's scout ships approached it to get a closer scan. But before the scan could complete, the scout vanished. No explosion, no crash, just gone, like a whisper swallowed by the wind. The Council sent a message to Earth. They said, "We believe you now." What do we do? Rourke answered simply, "Let us fight," with no more debate. Humanity activated all 6 Guardian ships. Each ship moved to its designated position. Sentinel Prime and Stormveil took the front, Oblivion, Blade, and Watchtower covered the flanks. Emberfall and Silent Cry guarded Earth and its nearby colonies. The sky was still for a few moments, then the attack began. Hundreds of dark objects came out of the void. Moving in unnatural patterns, they didn't use engines or thrusters. They simply drifted and somehow crossed massive distances in seconds. Each one targeted a different part of the defensive line. Sentinel Prime opened fire first. Its main cannon released a beam of light that cut through space like a blade. One enemy vanished instantly, but 5 more replaced it. Stormveil launched gravity bombs, tearing holes in space to trap enemies. Oblivion Blade used sonic waves that shattered even solid metal. The Guardians fought like gods. Each move was perfect, each shot planned before. It was even needed, and yet. The extinguishers kept coming. They didn't fear death. They didn't speak. They didn't stop. For every enemy destroyed, more came through the darkness. Like shadows with no end, back on Earth, people watched from screens, holding their breath. Some prayed, some cried. Others simply sat in silence for the first time. They saw what their ancestors had once faced, failed to stop. Inside Sentinel Prime, alarms flashed. The ship's shields were holding, but barely. Strange energy pulses were being recorded, something the AI couldn't fully understand. The enemy wasn't just attacking, it was learning. Stormveil took a direct hit. Its outer armor cracked, parts of it froze instantly as if touched by deep space, but it kept fighting. "It's I said. "Mission not complete." "Continue engagement." Rourke gave the order to regroup. He knew that if they didn't adjust now, they would be overwhelmed. But before the ships could shift, something massive appeared. It was bigger than the others, twice the size of Sentinel Prime. Its form was strange, almost like a living mountain. And from its center came a pulse, one that shut down all nearby systems for 5 seconds. That was all the time the enemy needed. They broke through the right flank. Oblivion Blade was surrounded. It took hit after hit, its systems failing. "It's I send one final message to the others. Protect the line. Do not fall back." Then it exploded in silence, a piece of history lost forever. Rourke felt his chest tighten. 1 Guardian was gone. 5 remained. But that's when something happened, something no one expected, from the vault site beneath. The Arctic ice, a new signal came through. It was the 7th Guardian, a ship no one had found. No one had activated. Its name, Eclipse Core. It rose from the Earth like a shadow with wings. Massive and glowing from deep within, it hadn't answered before because it had needed time to repair. But now it was ready. Eclipse Core entered the battle without words. It opened its wings and released a wave of light so powerful that the enemy's lead ship cracked in half. Its presence turned the tide. Suddenly, the extinguishers began to retreat slowly, but clearly pulling back, as if they had not expected. The 7th ship, the Guardians, reformed their line, holding strong with new strength. They had lost one, but gained another, and now they had a chance. Rourke looked out at the battlefield and whispered, "This is not the end. This is the beginning of our stand." And high above, where stars were still fading, the true war was just starting. The 7th Guardian, Eclipse Core, had changed everything. Its arrival had turned the battle. The darkness that once moved like a storm had suddenly paused. The extinguishers no longer charged forward blindly. They began to shift, to move more carefully, as if they now realized humanity might be more than just another target. Rourke stood in the command center of Sentinel Prime. Staring at the battle maps, thousands of dots blinked across the hologram. Some enemy, some allied, some already gone. Oblivion Blade had fallen, its place now filled by Eclipse Core, but the cost of this war was growing fast. Over 50 council ships had been lost. Some entire star systems had gone quiet. Even the Guardians were starting to show damaged, burned hulls, broken weapons, failing systems, and worst of all, the extinguishers were adapting. They learned faster than expected. They changed their shapes, their attacks, their formations. They had no fear, no leaders, no voices, only a single mission: erase everything. Back on Earth, people did what they could. Some hid in bunkers, others helped build defense cannons on the moon. Children watched the skies at night, wondering if stars would still be there tomorrow. And yet, there was no panic. There was unity. Because for the first time in all of history, humanity was not fighting each other. They were fighting for everything. Together, the council finally saw it too. The last few who had doubted now begged for help. They sent their best engineers, their rarest energy cores, their bravest soldiers. Even the proud Jarn Empire joined the human defense line fully. No more demands, no more threats, just action. Rourke stood before the united command and spoke. Softly. The Guardians were built by the past, but they belong to all of us now. We will hold this line not for power, but for every child who dreams under the stars. Then, a signal came through. The Watcher AI inside Sentinel Prime spoke. With more force than ever before, the core swarm is moving. It said, they are gathering near the dark rift. Final phase has begun. That meant the true attack was coming. What they had faced so far was only a scouting wave. The real fleet, the heart of the extinguishers, was still behind the curtain. But now, it was opening. All 7 Guardians responded together. They formed a final wall at the edge of the dark rift, the place where stars had already gone black. Sentinel Prime took the center, Eclipse Core on the left, Stormveil on the right, Emberfall, Watchtower, Silent Cry, and the Wounded Shadow Echo, formerly hidden until now, closed the gaps. They weren't just ships, they were legends come to life, and then space split open. A crack, wide and endless, tore through the void. From it, the extinguishers poured out not in hundreds, but in thousands, shapes too strange to name, creatures. Made of darkness and silence, they moved like smoke, but hit like thunder. The Guardians fired everything: massive beams, energy waves, anti-gravity fields, time-bending pulses. Every weapon from the first human empire burned through the sky. And still, the enemy came. Ships began to fall. One by one, Council allies were swallowed. The stars around the rift dimmed, but the Guardians held the line. Rourke gave no orders. He simply stood. Watching, heart pounding, he knew they could not win by firepower alone. They needed something more. Then he remembered something buried in the oldest log from Watchtower's archive. A final instruction from the first humans, never activated. A secret command only usable by those with first blood. Rourke had that blood, and now he knew what to do. He stepped into the control chamber and inserted the ancient command key. A bright light covered the room. The AI voice asked him, "Do you accept the burden of the line?" Rourke answered, "I do," and with that, all 7 Guardians linked together. They began to glow, to hum, to rise in power beyond their limits. This was not a weapon, not a bomb. It was a memory. The Guardians didn't just hold energy. They held the last heartbeat of the first humans, their thoughts, their courage, their sacrifice, and now that memory became a shield. A wave of pure light exploded from the center, not to kill, but to push back. It reached deep into the extinguishers, and for the first time, they hesitated, they paused, and then they screamed, not with sound, but with motion, with chaos, as if they could not stand the memory of what they had once erased. One by one, they turned back, retreating into the rift. Their massive swarm collapsed like dust in water. And when the rift finally closed, silence returned. Stars blinked back into view, and space felt warm again. The war was over, but not forgotten. Of the 7 Guardians, only 5 remained. 2 were lost forever in the final burst, but their memory lived, not in stone or metal, but in the hearts of those who watched them fight. The Council gave Earth the highest honor, but humans did not ask for thrones or riches. They asked for peace, and for the right to protect the galaxy from the shadows that might return. And so the Guardians, damaged but strong, took orbit above Earth, silent, watching, waiting, not for war, but for the moment they might be needed again. Rourke stood on the grass of a quiet hill, looking up at the stars. He didn't speak, he only smiled. because he knew humanity had not just survived, it had risen, and the stars would never forget.